Hello and welcome to Recovery Stories Have Power. My name is Oliver Books. Today I am talking with Danny O'Connor, a former U.S. Olympic boxing team member and world title contender. But his biggest fight wasn't in the ring. Danny battled substance use, incredible circumstances, and an eating disorder that nearly took everything from him. Now, he's using his experience to help others through DO Boxing Academy, a program that combines boxing, fitness, and mindfulness to support young people. You can follow Danny on Instagram at @TheRealDannyO'Connor and learn more about his program at doboxingacademy.com. This is a story about resilience, recovery, and finding purpose. So, let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Recovery Stories Have Power. Today I am joined by Danny O'Connor. Danny, thank you for being here and joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you tell our audience just a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I was a 2008 Olympian for the United States boxing team. I was a two-time national amateur champion. I got those victories in the same year. There was a feat only done by two other people in the history of the sport of boxing, which is Sugar Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns. So anytime you get in that company, it's pretty meaningful.
Absolutely.
I was ranked number one in the United States, and I was lucky enough to represent the United States and fight all the best countries, the best athletes in boxing competition. When I turned professional, I had a decorated career, 31 victories. I was managed and mentored by the Dropkick Murphys, who are a big punk band in Boston. I was ranked top 5 in all the major organizations, and I was a WBC international champion. So I've competed at the highest level of boxing. I was a main event at the Boston Garden, which truly was a dream come true for me, growing up in the Boston area. So, I've been blessed to have a really good career. And now, post-career, I have some really meaningful things. I have an enrichment program. We're helping at-risk youth, and I'm trying to get out on the scene to kind of spread my message and my story. It was something that has a deep purpose to me. It's something that I was promised myself that when I got to the position to be able to do that, I was going to do it.
That's awesome, man. So let's take it all the way back to the beginning. How did you
The childhood. Let's go. Childhood. Right. I'm ready. Listen, I do a ton of therapy. I'm already ready for
this. I'm not licensed, but I'm happy to hear the story.
and I know that this is here. I'm gonna lead with this. I know that this is a recovery type platform, which we will talk about, but understand that it doesn't matter what your end route is. It could be porn, it could be video games, it could be heroin, it could be food. It doesn't matter what that end route is, right? It's something deeper. So when we're talking about mental health and we're talking about coping and we're talking about habits, it's all going to correlate. And you'll find out my story is by no means your typical run of the mill, like, hey, listen, I had a problem and it was over. It is intertwined in the most craziest journey. And it really all started when I was in high school, right? That's kind of when you're at your most at risk. And for me, I grew up playing all sports. My parents were very supportive in the sense that they had me in every type of sport you can think about: track, football, soccer, baseball, and when my friends are making the AA team, I'm making the majors. I think I always had a knack for just sports, and I was dedicated to them. I played them all. When I got to high school my freshman year, I didn't know anything about what wrestling was. And so the second I stepped on the wrestling mat, I was like, I'm home. I was made for this. I focused everything to wrestling. I stopped doing every other sport. And I was on the mat from the second I woke up until the second I went to sleep. I loved it more than anything. Still to this day, I've never felt the same about the sport of boxing. I've never felt the same about anything else. Wrestling, I felt like I was made to do this. And so my freshman year, I pinned the senior captain, I made varsity, and now I was off and running. And starting freshman year, I became a Division I state champion my sophomore year. So after 1 year on the mat, That's how high I progressed. And I wasn't just wrestling in season of what your high school career would be. I was wrestling off season, club, nationals. I was traveling around the USA. So my ascent went really fast. And I was that I mean, my goal in life from that time was to win an NCAA national championship under Dan Gable at Iowa for wrestling. And every aspect of my being was focused on getting there. I used to sleep with the Iowa singlet on every night, just waiting.
Nice.
And now it was a fast shift. I mean, I hadn't even smoked weed up to this. I drank a couple times like any normal high school kid, you know what I mean? But I never used weed. Like I didn't do anything. The last time I ever stepped on a wrestling mat was my junior year of high school. So I became a state champ and an honor roll student my sophomore year of high school, right? I had focused on these dreams that I was chasing. My junior year, I failed out of school. My grades slipped. I was ineligible to wrestle. And once wrestling was ultimately taken away from me, I exploded. I was angry at the world. There was nobody that was going to prevent that at that time. It didn't matter. I was so angry. I dropped out of school. I left home and became homeless. I was abusing substance. And now when we're talking about abusing substance, we're not talking about like I got this little habit and I was like easing into it. I had at any time 5 to 7 different substances in my body that were hardcore that I didn't even know what they were. Right? I was taking stuff that I had no idea what it was. And I was just so, there's two kinds of angries. There's a type of anger where you're going to go lash out at other people. But then there's the type of angry that you're just going to hurt yourself. And I was so angry, right? Wrestling was my world. And so I was just hurting myself and I had no care, total reckless disregard for anything. I didn't care. I didn't care about myself or living. I started getting in trouble with the criminal justice system. I had 22 serious accounts against me before I was even an adult. And now what you have to understand about this span is, you know, in my most formidable years when I should have been in school, getting educated and going to college like my peers, I was living this crazy street life and it happened overnight. I hadn't even tried a hard substance, let alone smoke weed. And now all of a sudden I'm doing everything and anything you can possibly think of under the sun at the same time. And so it literally went overnight. I went from an honor roll student that was looking at going to, Division I NCAA, and overnight it was just an absolute polar opposite shift. And one day when I was about 19 or 20, I walked into a boxing gym and it changed my life. And still to this day, you'll come to find that there's a lot of issues I take with boxing. Half of the time, I didn't even like doing it. But the thing that I can never take away is that I'm grateful for that platform. It saved my life. Boxing literally took my whole existence and trajectory to the future and changed it. And so when I went into the boxing gym, I knew right away that I loved it, right? I wasn't on the street. I wasn't getting in trouble. I had, positive mentors in the gym and I was good at it. So from the time I put on a pair of boxing gloves for the first time ever, I made the Olympic team 2 years later. And so my whole life changed because now I was on the United States Olympic team. I was traveling all over the world. I went to Russia, Ireland, Dominican Republic, England, and I'm representing the United States, competing against these other athletes. I'm going to the Olympics. I'm sitting on the bus with Michael Phelps, and I knew, wow, this is amazing. Like this, when I came back from the Olympics, I was like, this is what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. Coming from, and again, 100% polar opposite from what it was. It went from one opposite to another opposite to another opposite. But this one I liked the most. I was doing something I was proud of. I was competing at a really high level. I was good at it. I was winning, right? I never lost in New England. My only losses came to, international and a couple other people. And the biggest thing is in the community, I became this person that changed their whole life around and started doing something good. And that meant a lot to me because you have all these people looking up to you in the public eye. When I'm on newspaper, I'm in media publications, I'm on ESPN, I'm on Showtime. You know what I mean? You have all these people where I came from and look up to someone like, hey, he did that and now he's doing this, or this was the environment. He changed that to do this. So being in that position meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to me to like show people, sometimes you make bad decisions and you can change those and you can move forward. And that's what I did. When I came home from the Olympics, uh, I turned professional. I had a good deal and I wanted to go pro. I was going to do this for lifestyle. And, I was lucky. I was truly blessed to have an amazing career. I was managed and mentored by the Dropkick Murphys. I've been on Showtime, HBO Sports, ESPN, CBS Sports. I've competed at the highest level. I have been lucky enough to be the only fight at Gillette Stadium where the Patriots play ever. I was the main event at the Boston Garden. Like, I was able to reach super high limits in the sport of professional boxing. I have 31 victories as a pro, and so I truly am grateful to the platform, the sport of boxing, for all the experiences that I had in life. That honestly, if I didn't find that, I don't know that I would be here talking to you. I can almost promise you that I would either be in some sort of institution, jail, something. The path I was carving, pretty soon I was getting to a point where there was no more coming back from that path. I literally stood in front of a judge one time, and he told me, "Hey, man, if I see your face again, you're going to jail for a long time." And I was never a bad kid. I never did stuff that, you know, I never did things it was the anger in me. It was the recklessness. I didn't care about living. I didn't care about anything. I just was so angry at a very young age. I didn't have super positive mentors around me. And even if I did, I was so angry. I don't know that them saying anything would have changed something. I was exploding and the whole world was going to see me. And, you know, find that boxing gym was like a godsend. There's been too many universal signs throughout my life that I look at and I'm like, okay, that's not a coincidence. No way. And so now that I'm starting to tell myself, and that's only a surface level
Right.
little description of the story. So I can hear you talk a little bit, but it goes so much deeper. And it's like, now that I start to tell it and share people, I am happy that I'm in this position to be able to tell someone, because I'm hoping that by doing that, the purpose, my words will kind of be able to give someone else that hope and inspiration to make a positive change in their life. Because, man, when you are in the struggle, and it doesn't matter what your struggle is, right? When you're in that struggle, sometimes sometimes it's hard to find that hope and that resilience to, after every single day of failing and failing and failing, waking up again and having to do it again and try harder and put your pants on and go face the world after so much heartache. It's hard. Like, the more people, the more places you can find inspiration and hope, the more chance you have at like reaching those goals and getting to where you see yourself getting. And so now, after coming everything through what I did with boxing and being in the public eye that way, to now being in the public eye this way, there's a ton of deep purpose behind this. And so it means a lot to me. It means a lot to me. I appreciate you letting me be here. It means a lot to me to come here and talk. And I've been doing, I did 4 podcasts last week from different platforms, different scenes. Um, it's good. It's good for me, and it's good for the people that need to hear it. And it's the people who are listening and are going to hear this and it'll resonate with them. I'm sorry it took me so long.
That's even just the glossing over it. There's clearly some huge swings. One of the things that I really admire about people that are in healing from being kind of down and out in that substance use thing is there's a real drive, right? There's a real, like, you described your life as one of extremes, right? Like, you're going to be extremely good at wrestling. You're going to be extremely good at self-destruction. You're going to be extremely good at boxing. Yeah. Was there like a cornerstone moment where you were like, I'm going to do this boxing thing? Was it as soon as you walked into the gym? And also, what was it like in the back of your mind? Like, oh, maybe I should check out this boxing thing. Like, how did you walk through those doors?
I didn't like the person that I was or the person that I had became, right?
Yeah.
I'm a good person, and the morals and the way that I live my life is based on a code of doing the right thing, helping the next person, and being a good person. And that code was instilled in me as I grew and I had mentors. But that code was in me from the second I was born because my parents are good people. They work hard. They showed me that through just their actions. So I was always a good kid. Like I had teachers literally giving me a D so that I wouldn't fail because I was a good kid, not because I showed up, because you know what I mean? I always was a good kid. And so then, you have this polar opposite where now I'm getting in trouble. You're in front of a judge for crimes you committed, and you're in the police beat for getting arrested. Now you're getting a reputation within your community. You're doing substance. It doesn't make. I never listen. Let me tell you something about substance. I never had a good experience ever. Every single time I took something was a bad experience, a reckless experience that could have killed me on any account of when I was doing it. I didn't like, I went from an all athlete, high level, playing all these sports to doing all these things that I was ashamed of. I didn't like the person who I was, who I had become, and I don't think I ever liked it. I never accepted like, well, this is what it is. I just was so angry and so on a path straight down
Mm.
that I didn't necessarily know how to change it at the time. Plus, I'm 14 years old.
Right.
I'm a child. I'm 17 years old. I'm a child. I don't know what the world has to offer. I don't know anything other than this incredible pain that I have in me and this anger. Um, and so I was already miserable. I didn't like anything I was doing. And listen, I for sure didn't want to spend the rest of my life in a jail cell.
For sure.
That is not what I wanted, not ever. You know what I mean? And so, everyone asks about boxing, and it's another one of those things, right? How do I explain it? Is it a coincidence I walked into the gym? Probably, definitely not. Was it something universal that brought me there? There was a PAL gym in Framingham. It was free. I didn't have any money, so it was, PAL, Police Athletic League, is always geared towards a lower income, right? So it was free. I chose the boxing gym. I went to the boxing gym myself. I found my way there. And when I walked in, there was this old guy named Pablo. And if you can think of Mr. Miyagi, think about the Puerto Rican Mr. Miyagi. And he even kind of looked, he had the gray hair.
Cool.
And he gave me time. He worked at the hospital right across the street from the boxing gym. And before work at the hospital, he'd meet me there. He'd come over at lunchtime and box with me. And after work, he'd go over there and meet me. He gave me undivided attention in that boxing gym. And I already knew I loved it. And it's not necessarily, we'll get into it later. I don't like fighting. I hate it, actually. I like the training aspect of boxing. I could immerse myself in training. It would make me feel good. It would give me resilience. It would give me that grit. It would build me up when I'm training. And so I loved it. And I'm a very cerebral person, right? I view my intelligence. I studied law for 2 years. I almost became a lawyer, which is another crazy story. But like I'm always thinking, and right. So when you really understand the sport of boxing, it's very cerebral. It's kind of like a chess game. And so all these aspects of the sport, like not being in trouble, being in the gym, training full time. And then when I started competing and I started winning, and now all of a sudden I'm in Sports Illustrated, a year before I'm in the police beat, and all these people I grew up with and, played sports with, now their parents look at me getting arrested and I'm ashamed of it. Now I'm in Sports Illustrated because I'm doing something good. I'm becoming a national champion for the whole United States. I'm living at the Olympic Training Center because I'm on the Olympic team. It felt amazing to do something that I was proud of, that I was good at, that was giving me good promotion, right? And so um there were so many aspects of the sport when I first started that I was like, wow, this, I want to do this for the rest of my life, really. Um, there was a lot of aspects that I didn't like about it that came around to bite me later on, but it definitely was a godsend. It was something that I needed exactly at that time. I literally was standing on the crossroad of being like, where are we going, man?
Yeah.
We going to jail for the rest of our life? Because if we are, just there's that path right there. Or What are we doing? Do we want to make a change? Do we want to do something hard? And listen, I got myself to that gym every single day. I walked there, I ran there, whatever I had to do, I got myself inside that boxing gym and perfected my craft. And it was just something that it was a godsend at that time because I needed something exactly at that time to change my life. And I couldn't imagine walking through the door on that first day that it was going to change it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no kidding. That yeah, it was kind of a rocket ship, right? Just straight up.
Absolutely. But I showed up every day, right? I
Right.
did the work. I'm the one that had to do all that work. And so if I had just showed up in the gym and got punched around a little bit and left, I would have been back in the back same situation. I stopped going to the street. I stopped hanging out with the people that got me in trouble. I stopped using substance. I stopped all these things and dedicated all my focus to that gym. So even though it was a platform that, in my eyes was a universal thing that I needed right at that time, I made sure I didn't ruin that. I didn't mess it up. I did the work associated to use that platform to skyrocket myself. You
For
know what I
sure.
mean?
Oh, for
And I
sure.
had I had a lot of supports that were around me when I was doing that.
Yeah, that absolutely, absolutely. So, I guess my follow up to all this is, was it like an immediate switch? Like you started training and then like you were just done with that other thing, or was it sort of like with more training became like less on the street and then sort of like building up one while the other kind of diminished?
That was like overnight.
Man,
It
right
was
on.
like a switch flipped. Oh man, this is it. This is what's going to take me away from that. I'm done.
Cool.
And that's why that's why I mean we really need to get into it to understand this because first of all let's talk about the downfall, right?
Sure.
One year an honor roll student, and then all of a sudden next year it's a polar opposite. Let me tell you how that started. That
Yeah.
wasn't because I started using substances. That was because the first time I was ever introduced to a scale was when I was introduced to wrestling.
Mm,
Now, back then, there wasn't a lot of weight cutting or maintenance tactics. I
mm-hmm.
only knew what I either learned or what I figured out myself. So when you're talking about, basically only a year span before I came Division One state champion, right? We're talking about a year in there.
Mm.
I was on the mat every second of the day from wake to sleep, but so was I doing making weight, right? I
Oh,
was
sure.
maintaining my weight. I was using these tactics, and now I was competing at a weight class that I don't know that I belonged at. I had no education about weight. I had no education about what was healthy.
Mm.
Now you're talking about a 14-year-old kid using pharmaceutical laxatives on a daily basis just so that I can make a weight class. You're talking about starving myself aggressively for months, and when I say starving, I'm not lying to you here. I'm telling you, maybe one day I'd have 6 saltines,
Yeah.
and because I am involved with the book right now, and I've been doing it for the last year, the story that I had to send over last night was about those saltines. There was a time when I was making weight where it was a handful of saltines and a half a bottle of Diet Coke that lasted me the whole day, and
Mm.
that's it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And so that's just the weight maintenance, right? Now I had to go weigh in and then I had to compete. I had to wrestle, I had to train,
Mm.
right? So when I was using all these tactics full board, right, every day, not just in season, every day, because I'm going to club, I'm going around the world. I am so focused on getting to Iowa. I'm only doing what I thought I had to do to wrestle.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're not going to tell anybody these tactics, or at least I wasn't, because what happens? Then you're going to jeopardize wrestling,
Yeah.
right? If you can't make that weight, you can't wrestle. And if you're telling people that you're making a weight in a certain way, they might not allow that. You know what I mean? And so I'm doing all this stuff. I'm wearing a sauna suit from the second I wake up until the second I go to sleep. Some nights I'm spitting 6 pounds, sucking on Jolly Ranchers, so much that my mouth is wrinkled on the inside, right?
Yeah.
And so these things, I'm missing school now because the laxatives are so uncomfortable that I can't even get myself off the floor to go to school because I have these crazy piercing pains, right? So I'm missing school. Not only that, I'm so far off weight that I'm kind of not making weight in the morning, and then I have to make it at night to then go wrestle. So now I'm skipping school. I'm skipping classes. I'm wearing my sauna suit. I'm making weight. I'm running, and it's all unmonitored. I'm just doing it because I think that is what should be done. And when you look at my whole career, because my whole career in boxing is against the scale, I did a lot of dangerous things. But the most danger I was ever in was in those formidable years, right? Because I'm in puberty, my hormones, those are my most formidable years. And I put myself at so much risk
Yeah.
because I had no idea what I was doing.
Mm.
I had no idea what the world was, what the future was. I had no idea. I just knew I'm going to Iowa and I'm going to be a national champion, and I'm going to go to college and I'm going to wrestle at Iowa. I'm going to be a 4-time national champion, right? I used to have this video of Jesse Whitmer. He was a 16 in Iowa and he won one year. And I watched that video every night on those old VHS.
Yeah.
And so all these things I was doing to make weight, I just viewed them as things like, I got to do this to make weight. I didn't understand anything about nutrition, your body, nothing. And so what happened was, the reason I was ineligible, I stopped going to school. My grades failed. I stopped, I started getting suspended. They wouldn't let me wrestle. Then I'd try to get my grades back, and then I'd wrestle again. And then ultimately it was gone forever because I was so far behind. And a lot of that anger came from, Jesus, man, you guys don't know what I'm going through just to wrestle. And now you're jamming me up for this other stuff. This is ridiculous. Once wrestling was gone, Iowa was gone.
Mm.
Right?
Right.
I can't go through this school. How am I going to go to that school? And so that's ultimately what caused this downfall, I think, of everything that happened thereafter. And
Sure.
it was all that crazy weight maintenance and weight cutting on a daily basis, that ultimately, you know, you anything you do, your body, whatever it is, whatever your habit is, right? You're doing it in the moment. But I learned later, especially with weight and food, you need to always ask yourself, what repercussions is this happening right now? Like, what's going to happen in 10 years? Where am I going with this? What am I doing? What's this going to do to me later? And I didn't ask those questions because I was just so laser focused on the mission at hand, what I needed to do now, and where I was going with my athletics, right? And so, that was it, man. And so when I came back into boxing, it's funny, when I came out of wrestling, I hated cutting weight. I absolutely hated it. I've tormented myself on such a savage level of being uncomfortable that I never wanted to do that again. I mean, it's one thing to starve yourself for weeks or months,
Yeah.
but if you've never not drinking water for days, 1 day, 2 day, 3 days, bordering on the line of death, it's one of the most uncomfortable feelings you can ever think about. And when you don't feed yourself and have the right nutrition, it affects your body in a very serious way. If you don't have carbs, you die. If you don't have water, you die. If you don't have food, you die. And so I played this very, very risky game with my life that I just thought was what I was doing to reach my goals. And so when I came back into the sport of boxing, it was very similar to wrestling in the sense it was a one-on-one sport. I did love everything that went into it, but I told myself after wrestling, I'm never gonna step on a scale again. I'm never doing this shit. I'm never, forget making weight. That's crazy. And then ultimately, I built my whole life in the next 2 decades around making weight and the scale. And so, it's funny how life works out sometimes when you're looking back at it.
Yeah. So did like going into the boxing thing, did some of those like habits or like things that you kind of like formed in your mind, was there like more support in like a more professional way around like your nutrition, your weight stuff? Was there anything that like held you to account, I guess, as you were like, I don't want to do this, but I'm forced to do this?
No. So I carried over those exact same habits that I had because that's all I knew.
Hmm.
And boxing is even different. It's not a team. It's an individual sport. And then when you turn pro, it's even different.
Hmm.
If you don't make that scale, now the business doesn't go ahead, right? Whenever you have a business first and a sport second,
Hmm.
you're gonna play by different rules, right? So if you don't make the weight, if you don't make that scale, you don't have a career, right? Because now you
Yeah.
don't get in the ring and fight. On top of the fact, if you don't make weight, no one's going to count on you, right? Because you're not the only one boxing. There's a lot of people involved in the business of boxing. So those habits carried over in the same unhealthy manner, in the same way that put my life at risk. And ultimately, 2018, I was living these two separate paths. One, I had a path where I had these serious issues with food, with the way that I made weight, with these coping mechanisms related to food, and I was trying to figure these out because they were debilitating my life on the back end. But on the other path, I had this career that was making weight. I had to make weight to continue. I had all these hopes and dreams, right? Winning a world championship belt was from the second I put on the glove. Yeah, would I like the other aspects of professional sports, like, money and fame? Of course. But accolades is what I'm a competitor. I wanted that world championship belt to cement myself in the history of boxing, right? WBC, to be specific, the green one, the most iconic one, right? With the gold trim. Every single night in my professional career, when I went to bed, I was thinking about that belt. It was it. And everything that I sacrificed was to work for that belt. So I had these two paths that on the back end, I was doing this, and on the front end, I was doing this. And ultimately in 2018, they came together. I got the offer to fight for that WBC. It was the welterweight world championship belt. It was on national TV in front of the whole world, and I was going to fight the champion. And this truly was think about all the adversity I came through as a child. And then now I have this moment. This is truly everything I've ever waited for.
Yeah.
Right. I had children at the time, and that belt wasn't just going to bring me, cementing myself in the history books. That belt was going to bring some money and some fame. That was a platform that was going to skyrocket and change my life and my family's life forever.
Yeah.
And so I had waited so long for that moment. And 2 hours before that moment became true, the paramedics took my lifeless and dead body out of my hotel room. I was unresponsive. They were talking about internal organ failure. And so I had used some very extreme weight tactics to make that weight. So much so that I took, nearly 14 pounds off in a couple hours before that weigh-in. And I was dead. You know what I mean? And so that moment I had waited my whole life for it slipped through my fingertips. I didn't go in the ring and fight. I went to the ICU.
Yeah.
And in the ICU, the show must go on. So the event still went on. And from my hotel room, from my hospital bed in ICU, I'm watching the event, and I'm watching the announcers talk about my issues and it ruined my career at that time. And ultimately that phone call, right? Because my wife didn't go watch me fight. After 2015, she never went to another fight. I had a rough fight. It was a very rough fight. She was sitting ringside. After that fight, she never went back. She waited for the phone call from me, kind of like Cinderella Man, right? I'd go back to the locker room. I'd call her, Diane's safe. I love you. I won. I'll be home as soon as I can. That phone conversation, in my ICU hospital, that was the hardest one I ever had to make. I called her, hey, I'm alive. I'm not dead. I was dead. I'm not going to fight. My career's ruined. Oh, and we're not going to get paid because I didn't fight. All the sacrifice that you have made for me and the kids, it was all not worth it. And I'm sorry. I'm in the ICU now. They got 15 wires in me. They won't let me leave until they tell me I can pee, and they're checking my stuff. I don't know what's going on, but I'm sorry. That was the hardest phone call I've ever had to make in my life. It still makes me tear because, if you have ever invested anything like I've invested in that moment, and it was gone in a second. And so those two roads of my habit, which was food, the tactics that had to increase because that habit increased, and trying to keep it at bay while I continued to compete at the highest level of sports and make weight, finally came together. And the wheels fell off that night in front of the whole world in a very public manner. And it was tough. It was really tough.
Yeah. Of course. I mean, that sounds like one of the it's all you could write a movie about it, man. That's the most kind of like dramatic way that could have happened. Um, so what happened after? What happened on the outset of that? I assume that was a. I mean, maybe I'm not assuming correctly, but was that like a turning point? I got to get my stuff together.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so the bottom line is I had the most elusive, most debilitating, most all-consuming eating disorder you can think of. And so like I got a six pack. Like who's ever gonna think about that?
Right.
How many times I honestly sometimes thought like, man, I wish I was just hooked on heroin. I could go down the street and I could find 17 other people in recovery that could connect to me. You know how many times I felt like I was just on an island by myself, right? And so it was so hard and lonely for me to be like, what is going on right now? And so that's why I say you like the end room. Like I'm your most untypical person to be like, hey, this is my habit, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so whenever you do stuff and you're going to continue that habit and you're going to continue to ingrain that process and those mechanisms over and over and over again, that's why I say you gotta, how is this gonna affect me later?
Mm.
Well, I had all these habits in wrestling, right? I would aggressively starve myself for, what's a training camp, 8 weeks long, right? Because I thought that that's what I'd have to do. I'd make weight. And then I'd go on these benders of, alcohol and food,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I would put on 50 pounds after a fight. I would be unrecognizable, just swollen, everything, right? Then I'd go back to training camp and I'd have to take all that off. And I would be able to take 50 pounds off, use these crazy extreme starvation tactics. But, amateur days, all the way to pros, like it was a light switch. Okay, time for camp. Boom. Everything's done. I'm starving.
Mm.
After, light switch, boom, camp's over. Cool. I can drink. I can eat. I can have pizzas. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And then, now I'm going back to camp. Boom, switch it, right?
Mm.
And then all of a sudden in 2012, I started going back to camp and switching that light switch, and it didn't switch anymore. Now I couldn't switch gears from like, oh, you got to stop eating now and focus on camp, or I got to starve now and not eat. The switch, it would take a couple more times for me to kick it in.
Mm.
And then eventually that switch wasn't working anymore. That switch was broken. And so I realized in 2012, 13 that I stopped drinking, right? I knew that alcohol was bad for me. And I had these crazy, one time I started drinking on a Sunday afternoon in Boston. And I woke up 3 days later in Canada on St. Catherine Street because I wanted to drive myself drunk up there and party. So I knew that I had these crazy, alcohol stints.
Yeah.
But when I went to a program of recovery, the thing I couldn't connect to was the uncontrolled nature of it.
Sure.
When I stopped drinking, I stopped drinking, right? The thing that I had an issue with and that took all control, mind and body, was food.
Mm.
And I remember that day when I'm like, I got an eating disorder. And then I'm like, what the fuck is an eating disorder? And like, do guys have it? Guys have it? What is going on right
Sure.
now? And I thought like, oh, okay, no problem. I'm gonna just get over this like I got over everything in my life. And I was drastically naive and wrong.
Mm.
It was a decade and a half journey that was just incredibly intricate and in depth and wove along with my boxing career.
Right.
Because in 2012, there was no way I was giving up my career. No way. I was going to figure out what I needed to do for recovery on my own end. So I was doing that whole journey while I was competing. I wasn't stepping away from the scale or anything. Those are my dreams and how I was going to support my family. 2012 is the moment where I might have lost my life almost that night, but it really was the night that saved me, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm an athlete and no sport is worth my life ever, period. No disorder of any kind is worth my life, nothing. So at that moment, I knew like that hit pretty close to home when you're sitting in the ICU, So I knew at that moment, and it was tough. It was tough. It was a tough moment to come to terms because listen, I was in my prime.
Right.
I had whole life for that little top of the pyramid. And no, not everyone gets there. It's not promised. So at that moment, I stepped away from the sport of boxing in my prime. I gave all my dreams up. I gave that world championship belt up. I gave everything up. And I decided I now had to go get treatment for an eating disorder as a male. And it was wild. It was wild, dude. It was absolutely wild as a male. And so I already had that like reserve and resilience from athletics, but now I took it away from everything and focused it on my betterment, my self development, the eating disorder, coping, everything. And so I was doing everything and anything you can think of to unravel this thing, figure it out, get to the root of it, change it, be better by it. Because I quickly realized like the eating disorder, it didn't care about belts or money. It just wanted my life.
Yep.
And my life was not up. I didn't want it. It wasn't something I was willing to give up. I could give up the belts, I could give up the money, I could go another road, but I wasn't going to give my life up, right? Because first and foremost, I'm a dad and I'm a husband, and that priority will never change. And that's the one thing that I truly am blessed in this life that I have. And I will not give that up without a damn good fight. And so for the next 6 years, I didn't get back in the ring. I didn't even throw a single punch. I focused everything on this journey of recovery related to the eating disorder. And it was absolutely wild. After 6 years, I felt great, man. And so I felt like I had conquered this thing in so many different aspects. I mean, anybody that has a habit can understand this. My habit, every second of every day, of every thought revolved around this habit. Every move I made, every thought I had, every decision I made, every future decision revolved around this habit. It was exhausting. And so after 6 years, I came to a point where I totally felt free. I felt like I conquered this eating disorder. And I wanted to go back to the sport of boxing. And so in that culture, a lot of people don't ever go back to a scale. They don't have these rules. They don't have no more disciplines. They don't have any triggers or anything that's kind of going to put them in that realm again. And I understand that. But I didn't give a shit about the risk. I understood the risk, but I didn't care. This was like a personal, like, no, I'm going back. This is me versus me. I don't even remember the opponent's name in that fight, but I remember that it didn't matter, right? It was about weighing in. It was about the process. I wanted redemption from when I almost killed myself. I wanted to weigh in healthy. I wanted to compete at my best. That's the other thing. Out of all the accolades you look, how much do you think I was competing at my optimal when I haven't eaten in days or haven't, you know what I mean? Right. So like I wanted the opportunity to shine at my highest level. And so I told my wife and I told the people close to me, and I said, I know the risk, but I don't care. Like this is for me. This for one time I'm gonna step in the ring for me. I want to do this. And it was amazing, man. Like it was a fairy tale. Like everything that could have happened to make it a fairy book story happened. I had an amazing camp where I had no eating disorder. I ate in moderation. I made the weight in a healthy way. I got on the scale eating breakfast a couple minutes before I got on that scale. I didn't dehydrate. I didn't use any weight maintenance that put my life at risk. I got on the scale and I weighed in at the same weight that I would have 6 years prior if I had made that weight. Remember, I took 14 pounds off that day of that weight. I got in the ring after not being in the ring for 6 years. Anybody that's an athlete can contest to the fact that that is an eternity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Not practicing or doing your craft, right? On top of the fact that it's a combat sport. If you're not doing a combat sport, you age overnight. And when I got in that ring, it was like I never left. I was better than I had ever been. I won. I knocked him out in the fourth round or something. It was at a Gannis Arena. It was on national TV. It was in front of all my fans, everybody. And nobody knew what was going on. They just thought I was coming back for this boxing match. And nobody really knew because I didn't tell anyone except for my wife and a handful of people. That was the most meaningful time I've ever stepped in the ring. And there was no belts on the line. There was no prize at the end of the tunnel. There was nothing. The only thing for me, that was my like final FU goodbye to the eating disorder. And you have to understand that this thing took so much from me
Yeah.
and my family, opportunities for almost 2 decades long of my life. And so that was like the final, like, goodbye, man. Like, I'm free of you. Like, I did what I had to do. And so that night was amazing. It truly was the most meaningful fight I've ever had. And then I walked out of the ring, and I was done, and it was time to move on. And so um I live my life in a very healthy way, right?
Mhm.
I don't use substance and I don't drink, and I do that purposely, right? I was in a lot, like, I knew the issues with alcohol, so I went to a 12-step program twice actually. And part of it was used to try to relate to people that I felt I could relate to more. And I just used food, right? I used the idea of food. I just didn't tell anyone. And I would do this, right? Because it was easier for me to relate from the tough guy from Boston wearing the Irish hat. And like, I could just replace my stuff with his stuff. So I knew how bad alcohol was. You know what I mean? I knew how bad substance was from my early years, how detrimental this stuff could be, and how detrimental it could have been to me if I continued on that path, right? I didn't choose an eating disorder.
Yeah.
I didn't choose it. It's just what ended up accumulating in my being and became part of me, and was the thing that became my habit. But like I said before, all these habits are the same. It doesn't matter what the end route is, right? It's a deeper thing. It's something that you go through. Food is just what I got, right? And it makes sense. I was around a scale my whole life. Food is the one thing that's always going to be that constant with me. And so now I live my life in a really, really a healthy way, with exercise, with my nutrition. You know, I don't put anything. I don't even take Tylenol. I don't take pharmaceuticals. I don't do anything to my body other than treat it good. I treat it good, the best that I can.
That's beautiful. And so your career has kind of changed forms a little bit right now. So like you're helping some kids and you're helping with youth boxing, and tell me about that.
My wife and I started this enrichment program for youth, and it's geared towards any youth, right? But mostly at risk is the people that it attracts to. We're a mobile service, so we contract with organizations like, if it's a YMCA or a Boys and Girls Club, or we're in a bunch of school districts. We contract with them. They bring us in, and we implement this program for their students. And what it is it really has nothing to do with boxing or fighting. It's just
Okay.
boxing training. It's geared towards social and emotional development. So
Nice.
my wife and I, who's an avid yoga teacher, she has a bunch of certs. We take fitness boxing, which means there's no contact, nobody fights. There's no weight classes. We took the scale out. We took all the brutality out. So it's what I loved about the sport of boxing. We're just using exercise, right, to maintain that healthy lifestyle. We have a yoga piece, and then part of our program is written by a doctor of psychology. So what we're trying to do is give these kids nowadays who have so much aversion to your normal therapy, right? Like, there's so much mental health issues. Like, I wanted to give a platform where these kids could have a healthy environment to deal with emotional stuff, to learn emotional regulation, to kind of get all these things that the training of boxing instilled in me for self-development, social, emotional, mental, and physical. Um, I was lucky enough during my educational process of trying to kind of curb this eating disorder. I went to the John Kabat-Zinn mindfulness stress reduction program at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. And so we have a mindfulness methodology within the program. And we have a whole really unique program to us that basically allows kids to come in an all inclusive, supportive community, connect with their peers, and deal with their emotional baggage in a healthy way, to then learn some stuff: resilience, discipline, focus, all the things that boxing taught me, and go out into the world and be good people. Your environment doesn't dictate who you are. Go be a good person, go work hard, go get whatever dream you want. And so that company is extremely purposeful to me and my wife. I've invested everything in it, all my time. Um, and it's my goal that it's going to spread throughout the whole United States and throughout the whole world, so that the program that I built, the platform that saved my life, now has the ability to save kids' lives all over the world. And, we're already in 5 school districts. We're in a mental health facility. And now we're trying to expand, throughout the United States. And so doboxingacademy.com is the website, and you just inquire if it's something that you want to bring to your community. And I'll tell you, it is really special because, even though I built the company and I wear a hat on many days, one day I build the website, one day I'm the lawyer, I got to read the contracts.
Yep.
A lot of days I am the boxing coach, and I had this kid that I was working with for almost a year, and he's just a great kid, and I was just being a mentor role, like the program, I was letting it work. And after that year, the mother came up to me and said, hey, my kid was going to commit suicide. He had already attempted once, and it was just part of our daily routine type of thing, where now this is the new issue we're dealing with. And she told me, because of your program, he doesn't even think about it. He quit all his other sports and now he just boxes. That kid is flourishing. He went from my program to a competitive team where now he's actually training and he wants to compete. And, you know, yeah, you want to make business, and yeah, you want to make money, and you want to build this cool thing and you want to do all this stuff. But at the end of the day, a conversation like that from a parent is exactly why I do this, because that kid was me. And so, it's just really purposeful to build this cool company. And I mean, if you go on my website and check the last newspaper article we got, it's me, my wife, and all my kids. Because, some days I have my kid doing the web design, I'm teaching them business. So I've not only created something that I think is going to be purposeful and help kids all over the world, but I'm doing it with my family. I'm doing it with my wife. I'm doing it with my kid. It's like the next chapter of my life. I'm so excited about, because you gotta understand, I didn't love boxing, right? I hated everything that had to do with the weight. I hated it. And I hated all the brutality of it. Like, I don't like fighting. I don't like hurting somebody else, right? And that is a whole sport. Like, your success is always off the back of someone else's failure. And the more brutality of it, the higher up you're going to get, because now you could be a knockout puncher. So I always had this tug of war with the sport. I loved what it was doing for me and the training of it, but I hated that I had to go fight, and I didn't want to get hurt. Right? I'm not. I always see what is what is. I'm not going to pretend like getting punched in your head for a career, it couldn't take its toll, right? Especially what I say in the beginning, you got to think about the end route. How is this happen, right? And so there's a lot of aspects of the sport, especially the business of it, when it comes to, what goes behind the competition, that I didn't like about it. And so, like, I was always in this tug of war. Now I feel like this is a clear path that I'm like destined for. I never felt like I was made to be a boxer, like I felt like with wrestling. I never felt like I was made to do this.
Sure.
But now with this new company, with everything I've been through, I'm like so uniquely qualified to walk this route, with so much purpose behind it, that it's amazing. And then on the back end, I can just start speaking. I've been speaking. I spoke to 2,000 people at the University of Colorado Boulder last week about Mental Health Day. And so, like, getting on podcasts, like, there was a time in 2012 where I told myself, listen, because I remember I told you I felt lonely. Like, I didn't have a ton of people I could talk to and be like, hey, like, I got these issues with this food. Like, I didn't have anyone to say, hey, yeah, you're not going crazy. This is what it is. Like, I didn't have that. And so many times I'm trying to figure this thing out on my own, going over here that's kind of similar, but not really. And I got to just use it for myself. And I told myself, if I ever get a platform where I ever conquer this thing and I can get to a place where I can tell you about it, I'm going to do that. So, like, everything I do right now has purpose. I've been working on a book for the last year. I mean, to be able to put something out where somebody's suffering in silence might be able to get their hands on it and read it, and the words in those pages might have the ability to save their life. I mean, the next chapter of my life is pretty amazing, man. I'm excited about it, and it's going to be more aligned with who I am as a person, using everything I've been through to help people. And honestly, I feel like it's my responsibility. Like, I came through so many intricate situations throughout life that I feel like it's my responsibility to be able to give that just to someone else and say, hey, man, look, this is what I did. If it helps you, just, let it help you. Because what was the point of going through all that? If not, you know what I mean? If not being able to help the next guy and say, hey, listen, this, learn from this. What was the point of going through all that? I am grateful that everything I went through, it built me kind of into my foundation of the man I am today with who I am. But, you know, I do feel like it's my responsibility to get on the platforms, the biggest possible platforms I can think of, and just share what I went through. Because it's so unique. No one's really told a story like this ever before, especially a male athlete. And there's so many different intricacies that are attached to it that like it resonates with a lot of people. That's what I've been finding. And it's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I've got two more questions as we kind of approach time here.
Sure.
One, when's the movie coming out? Come on.
I mean, I gotta take one step at a time. Would it be amazing to watch it on a big screen? Absolutely. And so I think that's a good. When I picked up the boxing gloves first, I didn't think about the fight that was happening a month later, my first fight ever.
Sure.
I'm thinking about the Olympics. And that's the same way that I've always been, especially with wrestling. I'm thinking about NCAA, right? Same here. I'm always thinking about the end goal, where's it going to go, and then working backwards. And so, like, being on a big stream would be amazing, man. If I'm blessed and that's in the cards, I would love it. And that would just everything about this. The more people that hear about it, the more people that see it. At the end of the day, the more people it has the ability to help.
Yeah.
And so, how can you not shoot for the skies when that's the goal behind everything? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like my story doesn't look anything like yours, but I'm seeing so many like mental similarities throughout, and I really think that's a beautiful part about like recovery in general. It's just like there's so much connective tissue there when you can see it. So I'd like thank you for sharing your story with us. Really appreciate you being here. The last question that we always end our podcast with is this. What's one piece of advice you have for our audience?
Don't give up, man. Do not give up. So that's the thing. First of all, to what you just said, that's what I told the author is when you read this book, I want you to be able to put your finger over food and relate to everything I'm saying because it's all interconnected, right? It doesn't matter what you're going through, you can relate to it. And so that's really important to me. And the other thing is, you got to understand with this eating disorder, it's like every single day you wake up and you thought you were going to try to do something, you had no control, and now you feel like a failure and you have all the shame and the guilt on top of everything. And so if I had ever lost my hope on any day to not get up, it would have been a different story. So I always tell people, like, no matter what, every day you have to keep that hope your non-negotiable. Like, you just can't ding that hope, no matter how bad you feel, no matter how much you feel like the world is stacked against you. If you just keep a little shimmer of hope, there's always a chance. And do not quit it. This stuff takes time. It takes consistent effort, hard work. Like, I woke up every single day for a decade, failing the day before and trying harder the next day. And if at any one of those days I quit, I would not be sitting here right now. And it just takes that one time. It just takes that one time, but after a long work and consistent effort and a long time for that one time. And it's like, those are my two biggest things. Don't lose hope. There's other people going through exactly what you're going through. Even if you can't find them right now, don't lose that hope and don't quit. Don't quit trying, even if even if you can only take one step ahead, just don't quit.
Yeah. Danny, thanks so much for joining us. This was great talk.
Oh, no problem. I'm happy to be here, man. I appreciate it. And my Instagram, The Real Danny O'Connor. I'm trying to like build a little following. They gave me that little blue check mark, so it makes me feel a lot cooler than I actually am.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm happy to be here, man. Anytime.
Thank you again, Danny O'Connor, for joining us on the podcast. If you would like to follow Danny online, check out his Instagram. That's @TheRealDannyO'Connor. And if you'd like to learn more about his youth program, check out doboxingacademy.com. Thank you so much for listening to Recovery Stories Have Power. This show is produced and engineered by me, Oliver Books. The music you're listening to right now is Come On Home by Chris Tate, and a big ol' shout out to the good folks at Passenger Recovery. That's the RCO he runs in Hamtramck, Michigan. This is a Faces and Voices of Recovery podcast. It would mean the world to me and us if you could go ahead and subscribe and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform. That really does help us out more than you know. If you have any comments or questions that you'd like me to see, you can email us at podcast@facesandvoicesofrecovery.org. Anyway, thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.